Hey, everybody, welcome to Pep Talk, the podcast that gives you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us, God, where we take all these interesting and sometimes complex health and wellness and medical conversations, break them down into simple, bite-sized, understandable pieces so that you can start taking some action steps in your daily life to improve your health, your family's health, and if you're a physician, the health of your patients and your community. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Naputi. I'm a functional medicine, functional neurological practitioner for the last 20 plus years. I've been helping doctors and patients get to the root cause of their problems. And today we're going to go down a very interesting journey, a very interesting conversation. We're going to talk about cholesterol and we're going to talk about statin drugs. Now, I've done many workshops before, many pep talk podcast on cholesterol, on statins, the good, the bad, the ugly. So you can go back and watch some of those. But today I want to talk a little bit more about this issue because I still to this day am getting this question all the time. And I will tell you that the more I study health, the more I study physiology, and the more I study really medicine and primarily allopathic medicine, which is treating your symptoms with drug and surgery and managing your dysfunction, not helping you reverse it or treat it at the root cause, the more I realize that we've got some fundamental problems in our system. It's broken. I'm going to go over some of the data. I'm going to share with you some research, a lot of research that's been done, and I'm going to give you some action steps. But listen, I want you to know that it's my job to give you information. It's your job to discern that information. You need to make an informed decision about your health based off of your individual needs. Listen, our approach is real simple. We have a test, not guess solution, right? So if you have high cholesterol, the question should be why. And yes, it could be dietarily related. About 12% of the time it is. But usually it could be genetic related. About 12% of the time it typically is. But usually it's lifestyle related. It's nutritional deficiencies or toxicities. It's food sensitivities or allergies. It's gut microbiome issues. It's the inability to methylate. There's so many components to it. But you've really been misinformed. And quite honestly, doctors have been, lied to about the truth about cholesterol. And, even still to this day, when the latest research is showing that statin drugs do not have the benefits that we were originally told that they did, doctors, for whatever reason, I'm going to tell you why I believe it's ego-driven, still to this day are not changing their tune about prescribing statin medications. They have horrible side effects. And the vast majority of people, some 98% of people who are prescribed them, it's not going to reduce their risk for heart attacks, strokes, or etc. Now, again, the more I study the political science, if you will, behind statins, behind cholesterol, behind all these things, the more I realize that, look, it really is a massive. It's a system that is all about profits, okay, and quite honestly, that's harmful. And if you think about this just from a common sense standpoint, in America alone, the number one cause of death is heart disease. Some 750,000 Americans die, or 700,000 Americans die per year of heart disease. Cancer is number two. Some 550 to 600,000 Americans die per year from cancer. The third leading cause of death is iatrogenic death from medicine, properly prescribed drugs, doctors' mistakes. I mean, it's an issue. It's the third leading cause of death. So if that's really the case, then I need you to ask the question, how's that working out for us? And the answer is probably not as well as most people would think it would. I want to share with you kind of the other side of the coin, if you will, about cholesterol that you're probably not going to hear in the mainstream. And by the way, one of the reasons why information like this is so suppressed and censored is because the pharmaceutical industry big pharma controls the lobbyists, which essentially controls the pocketbooks of legislation, which then controls censorship and controls media and controls knowledge. And look, I don't know about you, but if you go back and look at history, individuals that ever tried to suppress information, they've never really been looked at as, the good guys, right? And I'm going to tell you they're not in this situation either. Let's talk about cholesterol and heart disease first. I want to read some of my notes that I took for you all today about this. So frequently when an industry, harms people, all right, it'll create a scapegoat to get out of trouble. It's very common that happens. I mean, look at the opioid crisis. There were multiple pharmaceutical companies that played into this, and really Purdue Pharma was the one that took the biggest hit. And the Sackler family, which, by the way, deserves what was probably deserved more than the punishment they got, but there's always a scapegoat. And, this whole like jumping on the bandwagon to create an unshakable societal dogma that big pharma and big medicine does, I'm not okay with. And if you are, that's fine, but I'm just personally and professionally not. For example, like the health of a population. Let's talk about that for a second. Or if we're being poisoned by environmental toxins, determines how easy an infectious disease can sweep and spread through a population of susceptible people. The sicker we are, the less robust our immune system is, the more overweight we are, the more inflammation we have, the more we're at a risk from a societal problem. We saw that during the COVID pandemic. The United States favored the absolute worst of every country out there on the planet, and it was because of all the predisposed issues, the pre-existing conditions. The average person that perished from the COVID pandemic had 2.5 to 3 underlying health issues. And whether it was blood sugar, whether it was obesity, whether it was hypertension, whatever, and they're taking medications for those, that weakens their immune system and weakens their body. And this one size fits all approach, it's no good. So let's go back to the genesis of cholesterol conversations and the war on heart disease. Really in the late 1960s and 1970s, really debates emerged over what's really causing heart disease. And on one side, there was a group of practitioners, doctors, and scientists that said, "Oh, it's fats. It's the foods that we eat. It's the red meat. It's the fats that we eat. It's the butters. It's the milk. It's the lard," and that was not true. Then there was another side of the conversation that said, "Hey, it really is the blood sugar issues. It's the processed foods, it's the carbohydrates, it's the sugars, it's the juices, it's those types of things." And that's really truly the case. We now know, because of the spread of information, real information. And if anybody says what we're talking about is disinformation, all the data is clear on this. The evidence is clear. Pull your cranium out of your rectums, doctors, and start reading the literature, because it clearly shows that we have problems. And there were multiple studies that turned into really dogma. And one of them was something called the Jupiter study. The Jupiter study was a study that has been debunked multiple times, which said that taking statin medications, yes, lowers cholesterol, but really does it in a way to reduce the risk of heart attacks and strokes. That's not true. Well, it is true. It's true that it does it in about 2% of the individuals that are out there. And I've had cardiologists that have tried to argue this conversation with me, and I had them read the literature in a book called The Cholesterol Myth, and most of them have come back with humble pie saying, "Oh, Dr. Naputi, I had no idea. It really is our lifestyle. It really is our stress. It really is lack of sleep. It really is nutritional deficiencies. It really is us not being healthy that's causing this." And by the way, cholesterol is produced by the body when the body's under stress as a protective mechanism. That's the thing I need people to understand. It's a protective mechanism that really is necessary for survivability of the body. It's the excess cholesterol that is a problem. By the way, there's also a massive conflict of interest of the individuals who are on the boards and the committees who establish the standards of care for what levels of cholesterol should be normal. If you go back to the 1980s, it was common, 300 was normal cholesterol. And it's been going down substantially. They've said, it can't be 300. It's got to be 250. So, in the late 80s, early 90s, we wanted it to be below 250. Then in the late 90s, early 2000s, they wanted to be below 200. Now they're telling people to have it below 200, close to 100 is a good number. That's crazy. I'm telling you, if your cholesterol is below a 160, there's a lot of data and research that shows that's going to cause neurological dysfunction, gut imbalance, cellular dysfunction. Why? Because cholesterol is a necessary component of nerve development, hormonal development, brain function, and so much more. The outside layer of your cells are all cholesterol, lipid based. So if if we're taking drugs to shut off the liver's ability to make those cholesterols, we have a serious problem. And multiple studies now have shown that the problems are when we eat foods that are high in processed foods, that are like our fast foods or our standard American diet, foods that are high in carbohydrates and sugars. That's going to cause more issues than anything. The raising of your triglycerides, which triglycerides are half fat and half sugar, is the biggest culprit. And we also know that eating certain types of seed oils, vegetable oils, those things, canolas, I can't believe it's not butters, those margarines that are out there, those are the things, Olestra, things like that. Those are the things that are horrible. Now, one of the consistent patterns that we found is as they keep lowering the recommended number of total cholesterol, we don't see a reduction in heart disease. We keep seeing a rampant increase in heart disease. So, I mean, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and again and expecting a different result. I'm going to tell you, yes, there is a genetic predisposition, and running a genetic profile to find out if you have certain genes like APO genes that are not firing like they're supposed to, MTHFR and other methylation genes, VDR genes, a vitamin D receptor gene. If you have those single nucleotide polymorphisms, you're going to be more predisposed to having elevated cholesterol levels. And by simply changing your lifestyle, eating for your DNA, exercising for your genetic makeup, getting the right amount of vitamin D, eating the right amount of good, healthy fats, and minimizing your sugars can completely eradicate the problems that people have with excess cholesterol. What about plaquing in your arteries? So think about this. If you ever looked at a sugar molecule, do you know, if you look at a sugar molecule under a microscope, it looks like a piece of broken glass and it's very sharp. And think about that glass going down the arterial walls of your body. Well, what's it going to do? That hard glass form is going to scratch and scrape holes and injure the blood vessels, your arteries, and your heart. And what happens if I poke a hole, if I go and bang a hole in the studio wall that's made of drywall, what do I need to have to patch that hole? I need spackle. Well, the human body produces cholesterol as spackle. That's what fills those holes up. So if you've got a tube that's your arteries and you've got scratches down the sides of both of them, and now the body's putting down cholesterol to patch that, the problem is that the body doesn't smooth off the cholesterol. It just builds up and builds up. So if you've got constant scratching and plaquing buildup because of excess sugar in your system, that's a serious problem, you guys. I mean, that is a serious problem with that. So knowing the genetic profile, living your lifestyle that way is huge, but we haven't seen a reduction in heart disease and heart deaths with an increase in prescribing of statins. In fact, we see the absolute opposite. The annual statin usage has skyrocketed. If you look at from the late 90s all the way to 2024, I mean, it's not one of these steady growth. It's one of these types of charts. And the only people that are really benefiting from that are the individuals who are selling those drugs. Now, look, if you want to stay on your statins, that's completely up to you. But if you want to get to the root cause of why you've got it, I would encourage you to find a functional medicine doctor and start understanding your genetic makeup, your cellular function, how your autonomic nervous system is working, because your vagus nerve is what is the brain-gut connection. And that also controls how your thyroid and how your liver are communicating, which has a lot to do with cholesterol production and the clogging and hardening of arteries. I would also encourage you to start utilizing intermittent fasting. We've also been able to find people and put them on a ketogenic type of a diet and or put them on a carnivore heavy diet for a while and then shift them to a ketogenic diet. That has been phenomenal for reducing not just cholesterol levels, but improving all of the biomarkers that are related to cardiovascular health. Things like C-reactive protein and homocysteine levels and much, much more. And that also being said, there's also a huge correlation, and in some cases, a causation between genetic imbalances like MTHFR, increased homocysteine levels, increased cholesterols, and an increased risk for cardiovascular, heart attacks, death, or disease. And by getting the right type of cobalamin, methylated B12, and L-methylfolate, the bioavailable methylated form of B9, we've been able to reduce both of those. So if you look at a common sense approach, you can get some really amazing results. I want to show you a couple other notes. There's a book that was written called Cholesterol Myths by a physician out of Europe. And basically what they are saying is that the misunderstood role of cholesterol. Cholesterol has been vilified when it really is something that is absolutely necessary. I do a lot of work in our practices from a functional neuro rehab standpoint to help people with brain fog and ADD and ADHD and even neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia. And I'm going to tell you, if somebody's on a statin drug, it's very difficult to get the brain to come back to function when we're shutting off one of the most important nutrients to the brain, which is cholesterol. And I don't know if you have seen people or know people who have neuropathies, but neuropathy, which is demyelinization or myelin issues, which is the outside layer of the nerve. It's a little layer of lipid that protects that nerve and allows it to conduct electrical conduction from the brain to the organs and the muscles and back to the brain. You have to have cholesterol to repair that. And statin drugs are very problematic for that. It also talks about the flawed research of the Jupiter studies and the multiple studies that have debunked it. We talk about dietary cholesterol versus organ production cholesterol. We talk about the dangers of low cholesterol. That's a big thing. Low cholesterol is going to cause hormonal problems. So again, it's very difficult from a functional medicine standpoint for me to help a man or a woman balance out their hormones if they're on a statin drug. It's also very, very difficult for us to get chronic pain to go away whenever you're not getting enough cholesterol in the body. And I have a lot of children that we see that have neurological problems. And these neurological problems are things like selective mutism. We have a lot of patients that have issues with autism spectrum and et cetera. And we find genetic imbalances with the lipid genes and the genes for methylation, which are going to cause problems with trying to be able to help those patients. This research also talks about the safety of statins, the life expectancy of individuals who are on statins versus those who are not. Look, our ancestors lived a lot longer and a lot healthier lives when they were eating real butter, eating real meats, eating grass-fed organic foods, eating real salts, and living a real life. So what I want you to do is just take this information and just process it and do some research on your own. And if you just talk to the doctor whose job is to prescribe you drugs and to be a legal drug dealer, you're probably going to get the same responses and answers from them. But if you do some due diligence, do your own research, you're going to uncover that there's a lot of physicians who are no longer prescribing statins, and they're working on lifestyle changes and genetic imbalances and teaching people to sleep well, think well, breathe well, eat well, supplement well so that they can be well. So I know this is a lot of information. This conversation may be new to you. I want you to go back and rewatch this and share this with your friends and family. I want you to go to our website. That's peptalk.world. Like, subscribe, and share. Tag us on all your social media channels and platforms. And remember that knowledge is power, but wisdom is taking that knowledge and applying it to your life. So folks, until we meet again, I'm Dr. Eric Naputi. God bless you. God bless America, and God bless the world. Stay smart out there, and I'll see you next time. Be well.